I want to do that business.
Welcome back, passive investor. We are on our way to another passive income adventure powered by commercial real estate. If this is your first time listening, we talk about getting out of the rat race and living a lifestyle on your own terms. It's a little bit off the beaten path, I know, but we are sharing stories from our family and from investors all around the country on how they were able to go from the 9 to 5 lifestyle into being full-time passive income investors. Most of them are somewhere along the journey. Many of them have taken an entrepreneurial path to leave the 9 to 5 and be a safe landing place before they can retire on their passive income 100%. And others are working high income jobs and are just putting as much money as they can into their passive income investments until they can get to the point where they can just leave their job and step straight into the full-time life. No matter which one of those profiles you identify with, we have some great stories sharing how to get from point A to point Z and all of the different variations of the path in between. Today, we have Edwin Epperson from Tampa, Florida, and Blue Bay Capital Investing. He specializes in private lending, like hard money notes, where you put your cash in and you get regular passive cash flow every single month. You can either do this as an entrepreneur, starting your own business, and Edwin walks us through the steps on how that would look, as well as being a lender where you are just collecting the passive income and what that would look like for your long-term planning, your tax planning, and your retirement plan. We definitely have a lot of inspiring stories in this one, as well as some really actionable nuts and bolts strategies on how to get involved in passive income lifestyle through lending money to large real estate projects. We get things done in this business by networking, by pooling our resources to do these amazing and large projects that we wouldn't be able to pull off all on our own. Hello, investor. We have Edwin Epperson with us today. Edwin is a private lender and real estate extraordinaire, really digging into the passive income lifestyle right now. He's got some cool adventures that he just had and that he's going to be going on that you are going to want to hear about for sure, because they are like, I don't know, make me a little bit jealous sometimes of what you've been up to for sure. He is with Blue Bay Capital and has a pretty interesting story about how he made the transition from the regular rat race type of lifestyle and into this more passive income adventure lifestyle. So thank you for coming on, Edwin, today. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what brought you to the position that you're at today.
Absolutely, Emma, and thank you for having me on the podcast. I will be as direct because the story can get dragged out, so I have to actually mind my P's and Q's. I have to be succinct. So I will do my best here. As you mentioned, I am in the private lending space. What makes us different than the hard money is that I'm lending out my capital as well as other capital investors' money. We have a program called Turnkey Private Lending, like turnkey real estate, where you go to a real estate agent and they manage, they've already bought the property. They typically fix it up. They place a tenant at the current market rent, and then they are managing it. And they're basically selling that asset and you're buying it for the cash flow. And of course, appreciation. So we do the same thing for private lending with notes. We have a program where people can pick and choose which loans they want to invest in, and they can invest fractionally into any loan. Their capital is secured to that specific loan, or the capital is secured to that specific property via the loan. And then when that loan is paid off, either refinance or the property sells, the capital investors get their money back and they've earned interest every month. So it's a great passive income model that's actually quite rare, especially if an investor is familiar with syndications. You're going to get the cash flow, but there's typically a wind up period before you get that. And then depending on the syndication, it could be either distributed quarterly, biannually, or annually. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a syndication that distributes monthly, and primarily the reason, at least that I'm aware of, is due to the accounting nightmare that would be and the cost to accounts. So that's the business model that I'm in now. How I got there is actually quite interesting. I was probably like many of the listeners to the podcast, where they're interested in real estate investing, or maybe just they're interested in something other than what they're doing as a day job. They're working 9 to 5, maybe they have a family, and they're looking for a way to exit the rat race and start to live life on their terms, go where they want, with who they want, when they want, and do whatever they want. I was like many of your listeners, I was in the military actually for 13 and a half years, joined in 2002, shortly after 9/11, and I served for, again, 13 and a half. So I got out in 2015. During my time in the military, I earned my Green Beret, and I was in the special operations community as a combat diver with 7th Special Forces Group, ODA 7325. had a great time. I actually loved my job. Like, I really loved my job. Had been to Iraq, Afghanistan, Colombia, Egypt, been around the world, did a lot of really cool things. And I actually loved my job. I wasn't looking to get out of the job, but what I was looking for is passive income. I wanted something that could work for me in the background while I was downrange doing God's work. So in 2008, I actually read a book, A Millionaire Next Door. And then, of course, I read the quintessential Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And so my whole mindset was like, yes, real estate, that's the passive model that I want to invest in. And I'm sure, like some of your listeners, they had the idea when you're first getting in, you don't really know where to go or where to find your niche. So what's everybody talking about? Every guru, every ad, everything is talking about one aspect of real estate investing, and that's fix and flip, right? Because it's the TV show aspect. It makes for great TV.
It has great before and afters. Yeah.
So I, like everyone else, wanted to do a fix and flip. I was going to, in my mind, make a lot of money. And I did a few wholesale, but I wasn't a fan of the wholesale, the tenacity that's necessary. And it can be a cutthroat business. That just didn't align with how I wanted to interact with sellers and buyers in real estate. Fast forward a few years, I'm in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, or excuse me, I'm in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, going through Green Beret training. And I go out to a real estate club in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I meet this gentleman. He's an older gentleman at the back of the room. And he stands up at the end of the meeting and says, any of you real estate investors that need money for your fix and flips, come talk to me. I'm a private. Everybody wants to go talk to the private lender, right? So I want his number. I want him to talk to me. So I go back there, shake his hand with a little bit of pride and arrogance. And I said, my name's Edwin Epperson. I'm in the military. I'm becoming a Green Beret. Basically, if there's anybody in this room that you should invest in, it's me. So when can I have your money? I didn't say that, but that was the attitude, right? That's the attitude. And I'm sure he picked it up because he looked at me and he said, Mr. Epperson, I appreciate what you're doing in the military. I appreciate what you're doing for your family. However, I wouldn't loan you money if you're the last person on earth. And I was pretty taken aback by that. My honor was damaged and I was angry. And he said, let me explain something to you. He said, for you to be successful, or really for anyone to be successful in any venture that they're going to go on, they need three key components. They need time, knowledge, and experience. Right now, you don't have the time to dedicate to gain the knowledge. Plus, you don't have the time and the knowledge to gain the experience. Until you have the time, knowledge, and experience, that's not something I'm willing to step forward with you in. And I said, that actually makes that's logically makes sense. I get that. Okay. So over the next few months, we would talk, and he ended up asking me a question that really was the beginning point of radically changing the way that I looked at real estate or passive investing through real estate. He asked me, have you ever thought about becoming the bank? When he asked me that, that's a noble idea, but I'm not a trust fund baby. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I'm not sitting on millions of dollars. He said, don't worry about that. If you will learn the process and how to underwrite loans and make them safe, the money is going to come to you. You don't need to worry about that. I said, okay. So over the next 4 years, during my time as a Green Beret and as we're doing training and traveling and deploying, I studied how to make loans in the state of Florida specifically. We were based out of Eglin Air Force Base. And there were a few times when I got close to pulling the trigger. But in the summer of 2014, I was deployed to Afghanistan. There was a gentleman that I had met in the Pensacola Real Estate Investors Association. And he wrote me an email. And mind you, from this point forward, everything's email. We didn't have phone capability, or if we did, it would be really expensive. It was all email. And he wrote me an email, said, Mr. Epperson, I've got a deal. And he didn't know I was deployed. He didn't know I was gone. And he said, Mr. Epperson, I've got a deal. I think it's a good deal. Would you be willing to be a first position lender on it? I said, okay, send me over this information, which is what I had learned through the past 4 years of how do I create a safe, risk mitigated loan, but still earn a good return. And so he sent it over to me. I looked at it. I said, that looks good. So I sent it over to my attorney and had him vet his company. And then we, of course, ordered title. So I got lender's title insurance policy. All of this is on the email. I'm sending emails to the title company. I sent an email to the appraiser, scheduled the appraisal. He paid for it. My attorney drafted documents. The borrower paid for it. The closing happened and the borrower paid for it. And 2 weeks later, I had a performing loan that the borrower paid for all of the professionals that I needed to keep me safe keep me risk mitigated. And then for the next 9 months, he made monthly payments. And when I got back to the States, or actually there in Afghanistan, I just had this epiphany and I said, wow, if I can do this in Afghanistan on the side of a mountain, I could literally do this anywhere. And so that was the big aha for me, the big turning point. And when I got back to the States in late summer of 2014, I had 1 year left. And that's typically in the military where they open you up for reenlistment. And in my job career, they offered some pretty nice bonuses. So they were dangling a 6-year reenlistment for $120,000. And for somebody that was looking to grow, I was thinking, oh man, $120,000, that's something I could put right into work. But that would be 6 more years of doing that job. And while I did love it, I lost 4 really good friends during that trip, and I've lost countless others before that. And I just felt that God was calling me out of the military. And my wife, girlfriend at the time, but wife now, she said, if there's anything you want to do outside of the military, I support it. I don't care if we have to live under a bridge. And I said, there's this opportunity and I think I should take it. And she said, let's do it. For the last year of the military, I set my business up. I did approximately 20 more loans. I started to get family and friends involved, people that I had met that were looking for passive income opportunities. And the rest is history. I've been running the business since.
That's a fantastic story, especially if you can do it on the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. Yeah. But you tell a very similar story in a different, with different details that I hear from a lot of people who love their jobs. But in your case specifically, you had a time clock ticking on. I see this a lot with combat soldiers, with athletes, especially surgeons who know that any like little hand tremor or something can be a career ender. And you know that you are basically on borrowed time. Like, how long can your body hold out? How long can your mental health hold out? How long can this go on? And so a lot of people who love their jobs and want to stay in their jobs don't see themselves in there till they're 65, but they've never really thought about what else they would do. So they end up staying in it until they're 65 because they just never really take the time to say, hey, how could this be different? But with combat soldiers, athletes, etc., sometimes you have to think about it a lot more clearly earlier on, because even though you love your job, you can't continue to work that until you're 65. You might be able to do some other role in the military, but you're definitely going to have to shift careers somehow. And so I think that's why it's so common for combat soldiers or ex-military to be going into these types of passive income lifestyle businesses or investments, because you've had to really think about how you're going to make that transition. So for you, it was the fact that you were able to do something still in the military. So take us to the present day. When you left the military, you're starting this business. How did you just keep the lights on while you were just starting up so that you could work on this full time? Because you went from being a full-time employee to basically an entrepreneur and then working your way towards being a full-time investor. So how did the beginning of those entrepreneurial phases look like for you?
A lot of ramen noodles.
Did you hear me crack that joke at the meetup last week?
No, I did not, but it's probably a running joke with a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think that sometimes that has to be something. I would say that I'm blessed on several facets. I had a wife that was willing to, as she even stated, live under a bridge. So I was super blessed with somebody that did not expect a certain lifestyle. And if they couldn't gain that lifestyle, then, hey, I'm out of here. So that alone, and I know that not everybody has that. And that's a different animal to address, is when you don't have the support of your spouse in what you're venturing into. And I fortunately, but unfortunately for those that are going through that, I can't speak to that because it's a blessing. It's something I cherish very closely, that I had that type of support. The other was that I really learned to get rid of unnecessary things. Going out to the bars, going to sports games, having this subscription, having that subscription. They basically all came to a screeching halt. But there was also the flip side, which sort of went hand in hand with that, to where I was so focused and passionate about building this business, I didn't want to go. Even if I did have the money, I didn't want to go out. I didn't want to waste time on 4 hours on a Saturday or Sunday watching a sports game when I could spend that time calling people, doing research, building a business, setting systems in place. And for me, so just naturally, and it was easy to make that transition of cutting all that noise out of my life and just really focusing on what's necessary to grow the business. The first few years were a little hard, but And I joked about the ramen noodles, but it actually never got that bad because, again, and this is the second blessing, the fact that I had 1 year left in the military. And in my career as a Green Beret, when you're not on an operational detachment alpha, that's like the teams. When you're not on a team and you're not out there training to kick indoors or deploying to kick indoors, you're pretty much a dead weight on the team. So the team's going to say, you're taking a valuable position on the team. We need to move you off. And the quintessential, like, just, oh, it's a killer is you're going to get an office job. So they stuck me in an office. I knew I wasn't going anywhere for the next year. I was doing paperwork, but that allowed me to literally focus on my business. So again, that's another blessing that a lot of people in a full-time career, if you're in a full-time career, you probably don't have that ability to say, oh, I'm going to go work in the office closet. What's that movie where they move the guy down to the off, it's not the office. It's a comedy anyway, but they moved this guy down to the basement in the back corner, like closet, and that's where he works. So most individuals don't have that ability. I was blessed again, and I consider it a blessing that I had that. Hey, you're going to go to the office. And when I was in the office, everything's focused on the A teams. You're, as long as you're alive, you check in a couple times a week, you're good to go. So I had a full-time job in the military, but I was able to dedicate a lot of my time to building my business. So those two things, support of my wife and how my career was in the military, it really facilitated that last year. Again, I was able to do 20 loans. That started to generate passive income pretty quickly for me. So by the time I stepped out of the military, we were comfortable. I was growing a business and it was very comfortable moving forward. So then it was just a focus of, let's grow this thing. Let's see how big we can grow.
You hit on a couple of key points here. We don't all have the same resources. I, like you, had a spouse who was working at W-2 and was extremely supportive. And so I can't really speak to when people say, well, how do you get your spouse on board? I'm like, I don't know. Like, he was already there. We have resources that we can leverage. And sometimes we have to get creative about how we leverage those resources, but they're all different. And so being able to say, I had this ability to be creative and leverage this, or this ability to be creative and leverage that, looking at your life and figuring out what are your assets and your liabilities in your life, in addition to financially, it really helps you to be able to see, how am I going to make this happen? And I have other guests on who have unsupportive partners or who are single, and they're having to think about the short term and the long term. And they're just being creative about leveraging different assets. It may look different, but recognizing what in your life is going well and leveraging that as much as you possibly can is how we're successful. It just doesn't matter what the resource is, as long as we're able to identify those resources. So be resourceful and being able to figure out how to make that work. I think that's the key takeaway here, because everybody's going to have a different set of advantages, and all of us look at those advantages as luck, but we all have something. Some have more than others, but we all have something that we can creatively leverage in order to get us to the point where we need to be, whether we are able to focus on it full-time or part-time. Stories come in all shapes and sizes. And so being able to just look at your life and say, hey, I'm going to go down this path, and here are the things that allow me to be able to do that. And if you hadn't had that, you would have figured some other path out. It just would have it would have been a different story, but it looked differently. But your ability to creatively leverage that is really the inspirational part of this that I want the listener to take away. And not everybody looks the same. The details are always different.
Exactly.
So in today's world, I would love for you to share with us some tips and tricks on, one, if somebody wanted to run a business like what you're running, if they're more entrepreneurial or minded. Is that a word? Entrepreneurially minded?
Yes, it is. It sounds like a good word. We'll go with it.
Yeah. If you slow it down, it's a real word. If they are wanting to mimic you and start a business like you, and then also speak to the investor who's don't want to run a business. I have a job that I really like, and I just want to put some cash in and generate some cash flow. To those two different groups, can you share with us the practical part of what you're doing now? What does a day look like, and what are some of the tools that you use in order to keep yourself busy these days?
Now, this is probably where a lot of people are going to be like, I want to do that business. And my wife and I, so my wife is from Colombia. I met her on one of our trips down south back in 2012. Hit her over the head, drug her back to the States, and never looked back. No, I'm joking. But she is an absolute blessing, as I've mentioned. And so we went down to Colombia this year. We left December I want to say the 8th or the 9th. And we were down there for 6 weeks. did not have a care in the world. And while we were down there, I was closed a few loans while we were down there too. So this past month and a half, 2 months ago, this Christmas and going in January, it was a true realization that I have built something that is as passive as you can get without being completely passive, because I'm still involved. I have to underwrite the loans. I still have to look at them and do that. And so that does take time. So I'm not, that's actually where my next phase is. How do I grow that business as well as a educational component, which we'll talk about later. But if somebody wanted to start this business, I would say education is absolutely critical. And I spent 4 years, and some people may not have a 4-year runway, right? So it could be a lot shorter. You need to become educated in how to process and underwrite loans. Processing loans is pretty easy. It's, you just look at, hey, this is the information I need to gather. But the underwriting is, how do you vet and verify that information? And does that loan, after it's vetted and verified, does that loan request fit within your parameters? And so then there's the aspect of, okay, once you figure out what your underwriting guidelines, now it's creating moving as close to when somebody requests a loan, vetting that loan so that you can filter out the tire kickers and the junk loan request from the ones that really make sense. Because I made the mistake when I got in, everybody that asked for a loan, I was like, yeah, I'll do you a loan. And so start going through, and then I get in my underwriting and I'm following my guidelines. I actually have a documented 33-page underwriting checklist. Like when I go through an underwriting process, what am I looking for? And so I would start going through that. I'm like, wait a second, this loan is not a good loan. There's no way I could do this loan. And then I tell them, and of course, at that time, they've already paid for the appraisal. They've already done an inspection. They've already got EMD. And I found that early on, I was probably burning a lot of bridges that, had I had a clear process of what does the lifetime of a loan look like, and what can I do to make sure that process and build bridges and not burn them, I probably would be light years ahead of where I'm at now, simply because in this business, people want to do business. Actually, in any business, Emma, people want to do business with people they know and trust. And when you give somebody your word and then you break your word, you're breaking trust. And trust is the gold standard of all business. It's not a tangible currency, but it is the ultimate currency in any type of business, is that trust. For anyone that's looking to start a private lending business, or this is interesting to you, and there are some really incredible strategies that someone can use to expand their capabilities as far as how much money they have to loan, what type of loan products they want to offer. But you need to understand the processing, the underwriting, and how to mitigate your risk, because that will open up your door to the second crowd that you had mentioned, are the truly passive investors. They're like, I see the power. I like the idea of becoming the bank, of thinking and analyzing and investing like a banker does, but I don't want to take on the risk, and I don't want a full-time job. I'm not trying to build another career. I just want something that's passive. And so those capital investors, when you find somebody that would be for lack of a better word, a deal sponsor, then now you've got somebody that you can get behind, fund their deals that they're originating, hopefully along with their capital. And you've got a constant flow mechanism. You've got another revenue stream that you can look at and say, okay, I want to invest in this loan, or I don't want to invest in this loan this month. That's the two sides of the coin that you had mentioned that I could speak to.
Have you read the book, The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey Jr.?
I've heard of it. I have not read it, no, but I have heard of it.
It might be preaching to the choir because it seems like you've already got that worked out. But for the listener, this is a book I had to read in business school. And it really underpins, like you said, the rule of all business is trust. You can do things better, faster, more easily when you have built that on a foundation of trust. And you're right. Most of the horror stories that we hear about early real estate acquisitions or business acquisitions are when your lender falls through. They're bringing in the bulk of the capital to do that deal. They're doing a 75, 80% loan, something like that. And you're having to bring in maybe, I don't know, 20 to 30%. That's a huge discrepancy in favor of the lender. And when that lender falls through, the deal will fall apart. And so burning those bridges, that'll shut down your lending business real fast.
Yes, it will. Which goes to the point for those that are looking to start a business. So the first would be start to understand the process of how do you get a loan Like, how do I get a loan? How do I look at the loan? How do I underwrite the loan and
Mhm.
make the loan? The
Mhm.
second thing that somebody is going to want to do once they get the process, they're actually going to want to document it. And that's honestly probably not, if you go to any 3-day seminar and things, like, they're not going to take you because it's the boring stuff, but it's that boring stuff that you have to
Yeah.
document. This is my process.
You didn't start out with 33 pages. You started out with 0 things, 0 pages, and over the years of documenting and having things happen, you built it up to the point where you now have a pretty good solid 33-page checklist. That's part of the experience of the advice that you got back in the day, and he knew how to grab your attention. He
Yes, he
knew that
did.
you were the kind of guy who needed to have a nice little insult hefted
Yeah.
his way, so maybe he was reading the room or
Yes, he
reading
did.
you pretty well to
Yeah.
know that he had to grab you so that he could give you some advice that you would actually listen to. I don't
Yeah.
know, sounds like he did it correctly because it definitely impacted you, and now you're able to reap the benefits of that advice by having the experience behind you that you have a 33-page underwriting checklist.
Checklist.
We all start from 0. It grows though, it grows. You write down the first thing that you write down is, "I want to make money from a loan." Like, you really have no idea what's going
Yeah.
on, and so the first loan, just spread it out, take longer, take your time. The one who comes to you and they need to close in 5 days, you're like, "I'm not your guy." Because if you need extra time to do a thorough job, and the better you get at it, the faster you are at it. But at the beginning, I found myself really stressed out when I was looking for loans or giving loans, that if it was moving too fast for me and I didn't have time to keep up with the learning curve, then I just knew that I was just gonna it wasn't an opportunity when
Yeah.
I'm that nervous and I'm that
Yeah.
uninformed and I don't have the time I need to get informed. It's the same way when we were closing our first couple commercial properties. We had no idea what we were doing. We needed to be with patient sellers, because when we would get in with a seller who was going to basically put the clamp down saying, "You, at the end of this, your EMD goes hard. I'm not giving you any extensions." When you're a beginner, you can't really take advantage of those opportunities. They're not opportunities. There's too much risk when you have to go that fast. And so your speed of processing is probably vastly different now than it was even when you were doing it full time your first year.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. And that pressure is something that, I'm used to a pressure, a very extreme amount of pressure, but in a completely different category than I'm investing capital. And they're not small. It's not like we're talking a few $10,000. This is hundreds, if not into the millions. So it's not just a little, oh yeah, I'll do this. And so that pressure for me was something that I realized that, again, that had to be on the very front end. Setting expectations is something I would drive this home for anybody that's wanting to start any business, even on a private lending, is you have to be able and willing to be very clear and upfront about your expectations with your clients, both your borrower and your capital investors. If you're reaching out to raise capital or aggregate capital from other sources, you have to set expectations, even when those expectations may kill a deal for you, or they may make somebody not want to work with you. If you don't set
Mhm.
those expectations, then what happens when you get in the weeds and you have to fall back on those expectations? Your clients, whoever they are, whatever side of the table, they're not going to be happy. And again, that goes back to burning bridges. You don't want to burn bridges. You want to build bridges. Setting expectations is a great foundation to be able to do that.
I'll add that somebody in the group needs to have some experience. I shared the story a couple of times before when I started photographing my first weddings and I didn't know what I was doing. I would hire a wedding photographer to come in and be my second shooter. And at the end of the night, I had all their work product. I could see all the settings they used on their camera. I got to take it home, edit it at my leisure, and basically just peek behind the curtain at everything that I was doing. And when I made my first private loan, I made sure that it was with somebody who had a lot of experience and that other people had vouched for. Even though I probably loaned him too much money and it probably went a little too fast, I did make some mistakes. But the fact that he was so experienced and so trustworthy and had been in the community doing loans, taking loans rather, for many years, somebody in the team has to be more experienced. It's almost like
Yeah.
you have a brand new lender and a brand new investor. It's just a recipe for
Yeah.
disaster.
Yeah. I would also say, though, on the opposite side, though, I see a lot of experienced borrowers who've got the
Mhm.
experience, but there are things that they try to do to cut corners to save costs and save time, right? One of
Yeah.
those is the lender's title insurance policy. If the borrower is the one with the experience and the private lender, the individual, does not have the experience, that borrower is going to position the lender in a way that they would be more exposed to risk than what they should, because saves the borrower time and or money, ultimately money.
And
Though
gives them the
that's
advantage.
Yeah,
If they're
exactly.
if they're taking advantage because they have an inexperienced lender. I guess that's what I mean by when you have somebody that you need to really trust, because you can easily get taken advantage of by someone who's more experienced than you if they're kind of sharky.
I've heard so many times, Emma, and I don't know if I've seen it on your group, but in other Facebook groups that I either moderate or just am a member of, I will see somebody that said, oh, I gave a loan. It's typically a lot in these note selling Facebook groups. So somebody made a loan
Mm-hmm.
and then they're trying to sell it. And then ask them, depending on the state, is the security instrument, whether mortgage, deed of trust. Georgia has a security deed, which is an interesting document. But they're like, okay, so do you have a mortgage or a deed of trust? And the investors, no, I have a promissory note.
That's
You
insecure.
have an unsecured promise from somebody that you have no legal repercussion. You could go after the property, but it's not gonna fall underneath the purview of already set, established legal framework. You're going to have to go after them personally, and that is going to eat up a lot of resources, time and capital. And the likelihood that you will get all that back through that format of going after them personally is extremely rare.
It also brings me to the point of how I knew my first loan that was going out would be respected, honored, and was being done the correct way, is because the borrower was a teacher at heart. And so that's what the direction that you're going to when I was sitting down with him, and he was just so excited to induct me into this world and teach me and giving me resources and things that I could look up. He's just a teacher at heart. You're the same way. And in the Facebook group, you frequently put out educational materials and infographics and resources to help people learn to become better lenders so that they're not getting taken advantage of. And so walk us through where your business is evolving right now. I'd love to hear both professionally and personally some of your big bucket list items now that you are really down the pathway of the passive income lifestyle. What does that look like for you over the next couple of years?
I'll cover the bucket list at the end because I've got some pretty cool bucket list ideas.
I'm going to write them down, add them to my bucket list. Everything you do, I'm like, ooh, I want to do that.
So where is my business growing? Like I said, I've got the lending pretty dialed in, and unlike now I had this idea that I'm going to grow this multi-$100 million private lending company. I'm going to grow to be like a Rock Capital, a Pure Street, a Vizio. That was my idea. I'm just going to dominate the Southeast United States. And those dreams are cool, but how does it really align with the lifestyle I want?
It doesn't. A lot of people that I interview on this program are entrepreneurs at heart, but none of them are dominating types of entrepreneurs. We're all investors going through an entrepreneurial period while we're working on the full-time investment income.
I've realized that I'm very satisfied. I would like to grow it a couple more million as far as my annual volume, but I'm not really looking to get out there and again build a multi-$100 million company. That's not my goal. Now, if it naturally goes that way, and I have that long time frame to put in processes and procedures and grow it naturally, okay, that's fine. But I'm not out there like I have to get it done in the next like that's my 5-year window or my 5-year mark. What this has resulted in is because as a Green Beret, our primary job when we would go overseas was neutralizing threats. But the second thing was actually which makes us one of the more unique special operations communities out of the special operation world, is that our focus was really come alongside and partnering with partner nations, teaching them how to do what we did, crawl, walk, run. Like that was our process. And that has always been in my heart. I love the idea of that educational teaching component. And over the years, I have seen so many people lose their money in lending when lending is supposed to be, if there's any way to invest in real estate, lending should be the best way to mitigate your risk. And yet I see so many times these horror stories of people losing their shirts, their retirement, their friend's retirement, and through a bad loan. And I started to realize, because of my attention to detail and the military background that I have in wanting to set up procedures and actually have a process to do something, whether it's the business or the private lending, I've realized that I want to create a course, which I've endeavored on. I've set out to do. I'm just a few modules. Actually, they're in the bonus modules, but I'm pretty close to actually getting that ready and launched. because I believe what you said earlier is absolutely right. If I can be that experienced set of eyes that look at a potential loan opportunity next to someone and help them do the first couple of loans, that number one, that's just going to be more, it's going to build businesses on both sides. They are going to have the confidence moving forward in how to build a company or how to build a private lending company specifically. And I'm going to have the opportunity to look at deals and partner with them and deploy more capital. It naturally has created, and to do that though, they need to be educated there. And honestly, Emma, there is not, as far as I know, from the lender's perspective, there is no course out there that teaches somebody how to become a private lender. There's some great books written on that. As far as a course that actually walks somebody, gives them the tools, the documents, the calculations, how to do the processing, how to do the underwriting, how to design and develop a business, nothing's out there like that. And so that is what I'm endeavoring to do over the next, hopefully this first Q1 or Q2 of this year, it will be completed and launched.
Before you tell us your bucket list item, where can people keep up on you, contact you, keep an eye out for this course, get on your notification list for when the course is ready to go?
So the course I've already got, it's going to be a different company than Blue Bay Capital, but Blue Bay Capital is where I will launch the early sign up, or even, so I'm going to do an alpha testing and then a beta testing. So everybody's familiar with beta testing, but beta testing is actually further down the line. It's pretty much when everything's at a 90% solution and they're looking to fine tune it. I'm going to be doing an alpha testing run. And if anybody is interested, the best way to be alerted about that course is to go to Blue Bay Capital, which is my company, bbcfunding.com. You can sign up for our newsletter, and that newsletter, when you sign up for the newsletter, you'll just be in, and then that newsletter will be the very first group of people that get notified, hey, we've got this course coming out.
And I agree. I know of several books that have been written even recently about this topic. Not familiar with any courses, just walking people through the process, because that was the first real estate deal I ever did. It was a huge private loan, and I was woefully inadequately prepared. And maybe I'm just lucky that I really went after somebody with a good reputation, because it could have been a bad situation.
Yeah.
Okay, so BBC
for Blue Bay Capital Funding. Yep. Yeah. And then, on the website also, Emma, there's tons of, so again, I'm big on the educational side, and I haven't even done the course. So if anybody is interested in becoming a private lender, there is a ton of information on my website where they can go and start getting educated right now. Bucket list items. So my wife and I would love to do a Arctic whale watching trip. So that's something that going down to Antarctica and watching the whales, there's this evidently these whales that come up the coast of Chile. So that's one. Another is I don't have aspirations to climb Mount Everest, but there's a few mountains that I would really enjoy summiting here in the States, but nothing outside or worldwide. That's a bucket list item. I haven't narrowed down exactly where, and I know you all are going to go doing a pretty big hike. So that's always fun. I enjoy being outdoors. So yeah, those are a few. And then my wife is from Colombia, so we go down to Colombia often. Would love to visit some other countries in South America. I'm a huge fan of the Latin culture. It is an incredible group of people.
Now, we've got on our bucket list to go down to Antarctica. We're total eclipse chasers. Okay. We've seen one. We've got the second one on the calendar. We missed the ones in Chile in 2020 or 2019 and 2020, because the first year I was like, the one in 2020 is going to be better. And then we all know what happened. We had the trip paid for, and we ended up having to cancel it because they were when we couldn't even fly in, because we had to fly in through Peru, and then entering Argentina, they weren't letting flights. I was like, okay, this is
did
crazy.
you all
and
get
a lot
stuck?
Of Americans
you all went down there, but you couldn't get in?
No, that was what people were reporting to us. And so we ended up just pulling the plug on the trip entirely. And because they would get to Argentina and they would just stick them on a plane and send it back home. And so I felt like this is too risky at this point. Plus they had cut out so many stops on the trip that all we were going to do was just the eclipse. And even that was doubtful if we could make it in. So I really missed out on that with my daughter. And so we're planning the Austin one, and something in Antarctica coming up. I can't remember when the next one is, but wow, that Antarctica thing, that's a big bucket list item. When I priced that out, like we were serious, like we were going to go. And I was like, whoa, yeah, maybe we got to wait on that one a little longer. But yeah, to visit all 6 continents and see total eclipses on all 6 continents is one of our bucket list items. And that sorted out, let us know, because we're definitely going to be way behind you. Definitely check out Edwin's website, even the Facebook group. You've got great information material out there, and your love of teaching and your love of making sure that you have informed, experienced lenders, because the best way to get more capital into your fund is to treat your returning customers with the kind of respect that a returning customer deserves, because having to educate everyone from scratch is going to take a lot longer than just having people who feel very comfortable with you and continue to lend. And so let me know. I need some information about that as well, because we're starting a private equity and debt fund and would love to get some great operators where we can place some of
Wow.
our capital into some of your deals. And so
Okay.
let's definitely keep connecting. Reach out to Edwin if you want to put something into a deal right now. One thing we didn't touch on that I just very briefly, one of the things about lending, I think it's important, is that it doesn't have the same kind of depreciation and tax benefits that traditional real estate investment will carry
Yes.
with it, because it's more of a source of income, interest income, rather than owning property that's going to
Yep.
depreciate in value. So the tax benefits need a little bit of planning. It comes in as active income. So but the cash flow, you can't really beat the speed and the turnaround of that cash flow. And so it's definitely a trade-off there. So what do you tell your lenders about the tax implications and other ways that maybe they can mitigate paying less taxes?
That is an excellent question, Emma. And honestly, this goes into the heart of when I'm looking to have that conversation with somebody that's interested in investing in loans. The first thing I say is, okay, where's the capital coming from? First thing I ask them is, what is your goal in private lending? Because if your goal in private lending is to make these big double-digit returns, doing a reposition on a commercial property, or you're doing a fix and flip, private lending is not it. Don't waste your time even going in this route if that's where your heart and your goal is to earn these big. That's not the goal of private lending. Private lending is a cash flow play, a strictly cash flow play. Now, there's some creative strategies, which I will go over in the course, where you can do profit participation and other things, but that's the rare case. That's not the norm. The norm is you're just getting monthly income, but it's much higher than other forms of passive investing. I want to find out what their goal is for their investment strategy. And then the next thing I'm going to find out if they're concerned about the tax implications, because like you mentioned, it is regular, ordinary income. You're not getting any of the depreciation, any of the write-offs. You're not getting a different capital gains type of tax structure if it's 1 year or 2 years. It's nothing like that, straight ordinary income. So then I really encourage investors to look at tax advantaged accounts that they have access to today and how to get money into those accounts if they're concerned about paying additional income or additional taxes on that income. Some of those accounts would be like solo 401ks, where if they've got their own business, they can fund that 401k. I actually have an educational video concerning that. I think solo 401ks are one of the most under talked about but incredibly powerful tools out there. Self-directed IRA, obviously, and both of these have Roth components. So you can have a Roth component inside each one of these type of retirement accounts to where, hey, you're going to pay taxes on the current tax status for your income when you put it into that Roth component. But then after that, it can grow tax-free. Well, that's a great method right now for somebody that's looking to grow that. So there are some tax advantage. There's also some different accounts that somebody can leverage, or what we call hypothecation. So they can hypothecate an IUL policy. They can hypothecate other high cash value life insurance policies. And that is a really cool strategy that's not talked about at all, but some of my investors use that as well. Those two questions is what I always ask someone. What is your goal with your investment, as far as, is it cash flow, or is it debt, or is it equity? And then how are you accessing that capital? Because that's really going to play into what strategy you're trying to use.
That's a really good point, because if you don't need the cash flow, which if you're retired, you need the cash flow, and fast turnaround, regular payments, that is really what's going to determine it in retirement. And you are just going to be able to use other tax deferred or other tax advantage structures. If you don't need the cash flow, obviously using a tax advantaged account like an IRA of some sort will really help to offset that. Like when I'm investing in real estate that does have depreciation, I actually do it with cash because I can get that depreciation out. I can't get that same depreciation if I'm using a self-directed IRA. It's already tax advantaged. It would just be like too much in there and you can't use all of it. And so thinking about, are you doing it through a retirement account where it's already tax advantaged, or are you doing it with cash where you need those tax advantages? And if you don't need them and you need the cash flow for retirement, putting you into those buckets and figuring out what your goals are. Great answer. Lots of great options there for people who are looking for different types of things. And even ourselves, as we're in retirement, we're shifting more from high growth, huge returns over into just more stable cash flow. It's just a different evolution of an investor and the income that they're trying to derive off their passive income. Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today, Edwin. I loved the tips and tricks that you told told us the nuts and bolts of how to do something is often as important as learning the
Yeah.
why about doing something. Like you said, you read Rich Dad Poor Dad and you feel really inspired and you get done and you're like, okay, now what? Okay, Robert, you left me hanging. And so being able to be inspired by your story and being inspired by your bucket list items and the reason why you're doing something, and then you follow that up with some amazing actionable tips that our listeners can use in order to start getting into this and figuring out what their goals are. So thank you for sharing that with me. And I wish you the best as you develop your education company, because I think that it is really needed. And again, I could use a little bit more education on this myself because we would like to start putting some more cash into this for cash flow.
There you go. Happy to stay in touch and let you guys know on the Facebook group when we go live.
Definitely. And I got a LinkedIn group that I need a moderator on too, just in case you're interested.
I'm all about moderating.
Exactly. Yeah. I love having a teacher in there moderating because it really shines through what you care about and what's important to you and your ability to give back to the communities that you are helping and who are helping you. So it all goes around. So thank you.
Go. Thank you very much, Emma, for having me on.
All right. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much. Edwin has a great story about how you can run a business from the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. I want to say hashtag what's your excuse? There are so many things that we tell ourselves that keep us away from our goals, but when we really buckle down and get resourceful about the strengths and weaknesses that we have, we can figure out some way to make it happen. Even Edwin himself was saying he was lucky that he had a supportive wife who wanted to see his business succeed, but at the same time, he was doing this business from the side of a mountain in Afghanistan. And so looking at your blessings and looking at your resources as luck and that maybe other people can't copy that because you had some lucky things happen. Don't discount getting through some of those tough times to make your dreams come true. Edwin is a really good example of both sides of that story. Plus, Edwin has a teacher's heart. He really wants his lenders to be informed and make decisions that are best for their long-term goals and unique retirement plans. You definitely want to connect with him after the show, figure out how to get notified when his course is coming live, and find out if private lending would be something that is a good fit for your passive income investing. I know for us, that's where we started. I realized that we had to do something that was a little bit higher returns for a while we were still working. And now that we are closing in on retirement, we're coming back to private lending as a great source of steady cash flow. That oftentimes these larger projects just take longer to get to the cash flow part. They may be higher returns overall, but it's just a measure of weighing the pros and cons and what best fits our investing goals at any given time. I would love to touch base after the show. Be sure to check us out at our website, www.highrise.group, HIGHRISE.group. There's no .com. Sorry about that. You can check out our accountability challenges where if you need some help getting your goals accomplished, kind of like having a personal trainer at the gym, you can sign up for some sessions there. We have free networking meetings every week, as well as investment opportunities that are currently open if you want to check those out. I'm really looking forward to hearing about your next passive income adventure. So be sure to reach out and keep in touch. Thank you for listening, and I will see you at our next episode to give you more inspiration on your passive income investing adventures. Thank you for joining us.